How did one man become the greatest expert on Ottoman Greece without ever stepping foot outside Germany? This is the forgotten story of Martin Crucius, the scholar who explored a world he never saw and uncovered truths few dared to ask. The greatest early modern authority on Ottoman Greece was Martin Crucius, a man who had never left Germany. When the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II seized Constantinople in 1453, shockwaves radiated through Christian Europe. According to Pope Pius II, the fall of the Byzantine capital amounted to nothing less than a second death for Homer and Plato. Others lamented the destruction or conversion of churches, including Hagia Sophia, and feared that the Ottomans might uproot the Christian way of life. But as the Ottomans spread into Greece, taking Athens in 1456 and most of the Peloponnese a few years later, Latin Europe knew much about the post-Byzantine fate of the country. The circumstances of the Greeks were mostly the subject of speculation, and fears about what life under Muslim oppression would entail prevailed over attempts at finding out the reality of the situation. One 16th century individual steered a different course. For nearly 40 years, a Lutheran professor of Greek named Martin Crucius, 1526 to 1607, compiled a rich record of Greek life under Ottoman rule. Long before the plight of the Greeks perturbed Lord Byron, Crucius knew about the state of the Greek church, studied literature in the Greek vernacular, and learned about Greek dress and folk songs. And he did all this in Tübingen, a German university town, without ever visiting Greece. He lacked the means to travel, and as he liked to stress, his teaching kept him occupied. How did Crucius become Europe's foremost expert on Ottoman Greece? His extensive archive offers important evidence. He left a 9-volume diary, each coated in thick layers of annotation. In these documents, the personal and the professional merged. He recorded seating arrangements for dinner parties, and the students lodged with him just as meticulously as the books he read, the news that reached him, and everything he discovered about Ottoman Greece. Travelogues by Pierre Bailon, 1517 to 1564, and Greek histories by Leonikos Chalkokondyles, circa 1430 to 1470, drew Crucius into a world he would never see, while Greek texts, such as a book with sailing directions and translations of the Iliad and Aesop's fables, revealed how the language had developed. German informants in Istanbul were another important source of information. Alumni from the University of Tübingen had joined the imperial embassy as chaplains, from where they sent Crucius letters, manuscripts, and objects, including an ancient bronze coin with an image of Homer, as well as detailed observations of the churches they entered, the ceremonies they attended, and the people they met. In 1573, for example, one Stefan Gerlach sent to Tübingen an evocative set piece on the dress of Greek women. They veil their hair with the purest gold. They adorn their heads and ears with precious gems and sumptuous earrings. And with their other ornaments, they do not compete with our empress. They far outshine our empress. More than anything, though, Crucius informed himself by talking to Greeks themselves. Not in Greece, but at home in Tübingen. In total, he interviewed nearly 40 Greek men and women who traveled through Christian Europe in search of alms and, at some point, passed serendipitously through Tübingen. Crucius offered them a bed and gave them food and money. In return, they informed him about their language, culture, and religion. They helped him draw maps, of Athens, for instance, but also of Mount Athos, the most important site of monasticism in Greek Orthodoxy. And they helped him visualize the Greek world through vivid descriptions that he called verbal paintings. One of his guests made Crucius Cypriot food, while another, a woman called Antonia, sang him a song about the many hardships she had suffered in captivity, accompanying herself on his lyre. Crucius's guests also helped him decode his vernacular Greek books. At first, these texts had baffled him. The language was so different from the ancient Greek he taught at university. His first Greek guest, Stamachius Donatus, arrived in Tübingen in 1579 and became, as Crucius wrote, a living lexicon, glossing thousands of words during the week they spent reading together. The feat was no small achievement. Donatus could neither read nor write, and he knew only a few words of German. He and Crucius had to navigate texts using a patchwork of Italian and Latin, and sometimes even nonverbal communication. He often explained these words to me through gestures, his hands, and paraphrases, Crucius recorded in his notebook. Their collaboration extended into Crucius's own home, a house filled with mundane objects, but also with his wife, children, boarding students, and occasionally a maid. Donatus would go through the rooms, naming parts of the house and everyday items in Greek. With other guests, these collaborative readings continued. At one point, Crucius became so engrossed in the reading that his mind was overflowing with Greek words. He admitted that he had exhausted one guest, a priest named Colonus, with his enthusiasm. Even as Colonus was preparing to leave, Crucius trailed him all the way to the city gates, pen and paper in hand, as the priest read the city, pointing out objects and translating their names, while Crucius eagerly scribbled them down into his word list. The result of Crucius' lifelong inquiry was a body of knowledge unparalleled in its time. Some of his findings were published in his Turca Graecia of 1584, a groundbreaking work filled with first-hand evidence that Edward Gibbon would later cite repeatedly in The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, 1776 to 1789. Yet, the Turca Graecia was largely forgotten, as were Crucius and his extensive notebooks. The historian Leopold von Ranke would later describe Crucius as Europe's first Philhellene, but even he was not deeply familiar with the scholar's work. Ironically, and perhaps fittingly, it took an Ottoman Greek from Istanbul to resurrect Crucius's legacy. Basileos Athanasiou Mystikides, 1859 to 1933, after spending 3 years in Tübingen, recognized Crucius's archive as a vital but overlooked resource for Ottoman Greek history. Mystikides published a series of articles that reproduced excerpts from Crucius's notebooks and diaries, making visible once more how a scholar who never left his hometown became the leading expert of his time on a world he never saw.